Well, we are glad that you're joining us this evening. We are going to jump in. We're having this colorful conversation tonight, and we want to talk about the church's response to how we can be a part of racial unity. And we talked about it a little bit on Sundays for the last few weeks, but there's just so much to talk about, so much to do, that it's not enough to just say something in a sermon. And one of the first parts that we have to do is to listen and to learn and to talk to people who can educate us and give us information. And so today we are going to do that. I have with me here Roland, and Roland Baker is a trusted friend of Anchor Chapel. In fact, he's so trusted that we made him a trustee.
Right.
And so we're gonna listen to Roland. He's gonna answer some questions for us. If there's something specific that you want to hear, you can type that in the questions in the comments. We might see that, we might not, but even if we don't get to it during the video, we'll be able to get to it later and to be able to answer that. But before I kick it off, if you haven't already clicked share, do that right now, because this conversation is something that we want to make sure that as many people that can hear it will, because this isn't something to keep private and keep secret. So it's great if you clicked like or like a heart or something. That's great, but we really need you to click that share button and tell your friends, hey, right now jump on this. This is going to be good, because we really want to make a difference and bring the love of Christ to this situation of racism in our country. And so before we jump in, I just want Roland to tell us, just in case you haven't had the chance to meet him, just to introduce himself a little bit, and then he's going to pray to get us going.
All right, everybody. Like I said, I'm Roland Baker. I've been with Anchor for about a year and a half. Been in Baton Rouge since 2013. Just a little bit about me. In the day, I'm an IT analyst, and at night, I'm like a superhero. I do photography and everything else. And I'm very excited. Like I said, this is just going to show something that everybody should be doing, every conversation that everybody should be having in their homes, with their friends, with their co-workers, to further progress in this nation and with Jesus. So I'm going to go ahead and just pray us in, and then we're going to start. Lord, thank you for bringing us here together, Lord. We just love you, and we thank you, Lord. And that you, everything that we talk about today, it will be something that will enlighten people, that it will broaden people to do what is right and to say what is right and to speak up what is right, Lord. And so we ask that you soften everybody's heart, that you open everybody's eyes, that you open everybody's ears to receive what's going on. And that everything that happens today is going to point back to you, because you're going to get all the glory for all this, Lord. And we thank you and we love you. Amen.
So I started talking to Roland a couple weeks ago. Whenever I saw what was happening in the news with the news of George Floyd, and then with the response of so many. In fact, I had missed what had happened because I wasn't engaged in the news, and I called Roland and said, man, I'm sorry. I didn't even know what was happening in the world until I saw the protests. And so I reached out to Roland and started a conversation with him about what we could do as a church. Before we get too much into what we can do, I just want to talk a little bit about some realities of things. And to start off with this, I know Roland, and I know many of you know Roland and care about Roland. And so what I wanted to do is start off by making things personal and ask Roland if he could just share a little bit about some of the impacts that he's seen in his life. How have you seen racism specifically affect you?
That's a great question. I think a lot of times we have to we have this false reality of what's really going on. And so I kind of want to go back. You might have seen on Facebook a lot of black people putting a thread out like, hey, when was the first time that you remember experiencing racism? And like, I can go all the way back to elementary. Mm-hmm. You know, you're in class and you have kids passing out birthday invitations for their parties. And then they get to you and they either say, I would invite you, or I can't invite you, or you're not getting one because my parents told me not to invite any black people. And so I'm 30 years old. So like, this is, you know, like I'm way older than anything else. that kind of stuff. Growing up, I've had my fair share of being called the N-word. I do have a story where I was chased by the KKK. That stuff is reality, and you even go down to the point that my parents, my aunts and uncles and stuff can talk about their stories when before segregation and after segregation. So we're not that far removed, and I think a lot of times we stuff is glanced over, so that we can't really tell what's really going on.
Yeah. Well, as you say that, one of the things that really comes to mind for me is that I'm sorry. Yeah, we fixed it. Sorry, we still got people fixing the music for us. It's all good. I don't know if it was Kathy or Christine.
It looks like Kathy.
Okay. They're twins, so it's kind of hard to tell the difference. But one of the things you said there that got me is that you talked about the KKK, and that's something that for me, like, I see that on TV, I see that in movies, and in my mind I think, oh, that's something from so long ago before me, and yet we meet people that are only in their 30s, and they still remember these things because it's happened during your lifetime. This isn't something that happened 50 years ago. This is something that's happening in the last 15 years, in the last 10 years, that people are still having these issues. So racism isn't gone.
Far from it. And so a little bit even more from my background, from me, like growing up, like as school, you had people who were basically open racists. Like, there was no shame about it. You knew who they were. We had one that was a substitute teacher, and you think about how crazy it is, and that's just how it was allowed. You had kids come up to you. I remember one time in middle school, I was talking to somebody, and he was like, I'm not supposed to like you, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? He was like, because you're black. Like, my parents told me we don't like black people. We're not supposed to be friends and talk and hang out with black people, just stuff like that. And like I said, that was in middle school. That's what, like 20 something years ago for me.
Right. Yeah, that's so I guess the question I wanted to ask first, or after that, just to kind of start our conversation of setting some of this up, is what role, like we're part of a church. Anchor Chapel is a church, and most of the people that are watching are part of Anchor Chapel and would profess to being believers in Jesus. And so what role does race play for a person who believes in Jesus? How has race come into the picture for people? How should it come into the picture, I guess, is the question, for people who believe in following Jesus?
Well, if we go all the way back, and we look at each other, we're all creations of God. So God specifically created us different. God is a God of uniqueness, if we think about it. Not one person has the same, thumbprint. So if God is a person of uniqueness and we're all made in his image, that means that everybody, whether race, culture, has something unique to bring for the glory of God in wholeness and togetherness. So that's how it should be. Look, it shouldn't, have you anything different, or I should worship somewhere else or worship with these people. You should want to worship with people of diversity, because it's going to bring all of God's giftings and all of God's uniqueness he's put into everybody to have the best experience.
Yeah. One of the things when I've been trying to study and learn a lot, because it's become very clear how ignorant I am, and I know so many are on this issue. And so I was reading a book called Be the Bridge, and it's about finding racial unity in the church. And one of the things that she talks about, the author talks about in the book, is that race, first of all, it's not even something that is defined in the Bible. It doesn't exist in the Bible, because race is a social construct. It's a political construct that's put in place really to keep people in power. There's no difference in your race and my race. We're both human beings, right?
Correct.
Now, we have different ethnic backgrounds. We have different cultures. But the word race in itself is really an affront to God, in the fact that God did not create different races of people. He created us all in his image. Like you said, we are all created beings that were made to be image bearers of God. And so God doesn't see us through the lens of race. In fact, today I was talking to Roland about some things, and I was asking, how do I say this? Do I talk about race or ethnicity? And it's the same, like getting that word out of your mind. We don't need to refer to people as their race, because their race is the human race. Their race is people. Their race is not their color. Their race is not their ethnicity. That doesn't exist. Race was designed so that we could use some kind of division to keep people in authority, to keep people in control of things. So I guess the question I wanted to follow up with that is, so I've been watching some things on the news, and you see people start to talk about, especially in these last week, I've seen people start to question George Floyd and question the character of George Floyd. That maybe he had issues, maybe he had a criminal history, maybe he was on some kind of substance at the time. What is it? I guess what is the possible guilt or innocence of George Floyd in any crime? How in the world does that affect how we treat someone? Why does that need to play into how we treat someone?
That's a great question. A lot of times there's a narrative to bring up somebody's past or their present to kind of like justify what's going on, to take blame off the actual people or the actual situation that caused it, and also to make it a little more for you to digest it, that you can take it in a little bit more, that you can sleep a little bit better at night. If you feel like, well, maybe his actions kind of caused what was happening, or he had it coming to him, or it was worth it. And then, but if we go back into the Bible, when Jesus came here and he was on the earth, people constantly would try to bring up somebody's past or their present to say, why are you dealing with them? They don't deserve love. They don't deserve grace. They don't deserve mercy. And Jesus was like, that doesn't have anything to do with how you should be treating them regardless. But that's basically a lot what it goes for. It's, hey, let's kind of let's criminalize him. So even when you go to court, your jurors are already kind of has this ideology like, well, I don't know if he really deserves justice, or if we really should, that's kind of a little bit of his fault. Maybe if he complied or anything, he'll still be here today,
Yeah. I mean, it seems absurd to me to think, he had done other things wrong in his life, therefore we can defend the hateful acts of another person. And it's just so hard to think about, why would we fight so hard to defend someone who has done something that it was so hateful, and in doing that we're going to attack the person who is the victim. We're gonna take away from the person who is the victim so that we can make the attacker look better. And it's mind-boggling to think that for some reason that's been ingrained in how we process things, to try and, like you said, trying to soften it up, trying to make it more palatable, because we don't like what we see, so maybe we can come up with a narrative that makes us feel better about it. One of the things that you hear people say a lot, they'll talk about, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. In fact, I don't even see color. When I look at people, I just see people. I just see people, and I don't. When I look at you, Roland, I don't see color. Well, I mean, how does that work? What I mean, is that okay?
So why would we want to be blind to anything? When you're blind to something, you don't see it, you don't understand it. The whole point of, or whole plight of being colorblind is basically a cop-out. It's basically saying, hey, I see you, but I really don't see you. I see you, but I can ignore what you're going through or things that are affecting you. And that way I can remove myself of being part of the solution, that I can sleep better at night. Like I said, you're just, it even goes deep to a lot of microaggressions that a lot of people don't understand that they do, implicit biases that a lot of people don't have, like your backward compliments. Like, you may grow up and it was like, well, Roland, you don't talk like a black guy, or you're like an Oreo, I don't see you as black, and that's like, so you can ignore, who I am, how God created me, and that you can ignore everything and all the injustices and the problems that I go through just for your own comfort. But, we love you. We love you,
Yeah. Well, and your skin color does not necessarily dictate what your cultural upbringing has been.
Exactly.
But the fact it remains that for many people of color, they do have different cultural upbringings. Mm-hmm. And ignoring that and just saying, I see you all as the same, is then assuming that everybody must have the same background as me. If we're all the same, right, then your experience in life is the same as my experience, right, in life.
And that's another reason, so I graduated from Grambling State University. I grew up in a predominantly white town, a predominantly white school. And another reason I went to an HBCU, because the diversity amongst black people, and a lot of times that's lost. People just think like, you're black. From the different people from different states and different upbringings from different countries that I was able to learn from, because we're all not the same. We're still humans, and we still have different cultures and environments that we like to learn. I might, just from your music taste, from what you like to watch and everything else, there's still diversity. And that was one of the reasons that I went, so just to say that's colorblind or that we're all the same, that's crazy.
Yeah, well, and the thing that hit me, you were talking about earlier, that we're all made in the image of God. Mm-hmm. And God made color. Like he's the one that made people with different colored skin. And we know that he made man and woman in his own image. Mm-hmm. So if God saw fit to make people in different colors, then that is obviously part of expressing the full image of God. Mm-hmm. And if we say there's no color, God says, wait a minute, I designed that color.
Right.
You want to see me, you want to experience me and know me, well then you need to see the color, because that's part of the way I've designed you. And you're saying you don't want to see that, and that's an affront to God, because God says, look, I want you to see it. Right. I want it to be part of the experience, because if you don't experience the diversity of each other, you're not experiencing the fullness of who God is.
That's good. And like I said, I think a lot of people don't think about when we say stuff like that. That's like a slap in the face to God, because it's like you're telling me what I created wasn't good enough, mm-hmm, or it's not good enough, or not enough for you to care to support, just like anybody else.
Yeah. So, if people, most people you talk to, and I haven't talked to anybody lately that just says, I don't believe there's such a thing as racism. I haven't talked to anybody who says, I think racism is a good idea. Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't have had a long conversation with that person. But it seems like so many people sit on the sidelines in this. And I know for me, I haven't felt a need to be a big part of this conversation in my life. And so why is it that so many people just think, you know what, this is not a problem for me to solve. I just need to sit on the sides on this one.
It's a comfort thing. A lot of people will skate their lives and do what they feel that's good enough, but not enough to make them feel uncomfortable. For a lot of people, this conversation is uncomfortable. The good thing about that is it's showing that you have a chance to grow. A lot of times we get too complacent in life, and it's just uncomfortability.
Yeah, I in some of the studies I was doing, I came across a quote from Martin Luther King, and it really gets to the heart for me of this issue. And this quote's from Dr. King. It was written in a different time, and so it uses language I'm not comfortable with, but it is what it is. I told Roland, I said, man, how do I say this? And he said, you just got to say it, because it's
a quote.
And it also shows the times that we've come through.
Right.
But Martin Luther King, it's kind of a long quote, but it's important. He says, I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, who's more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, instead of a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. He constantly says, I agree with the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of action. Who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythological concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. As I read through that, I just heard that and I thought, yeah, like it gets to the point, like we would rather say, I don't want there to be conflict. And so if I can pretend the conflict doesn't exist, if I can stay out of it, then maybe the conflict will solve itself. Because I would rather there be no conflict, and if I get involved, then it's just going to stir things up. So how about you stop fighting, and I'll just leave it alone, and maybe this can all just go away. And the problem is, we've sat by for decades as the majority of people and said, I'm not getting involved in this because it's not my battle. I'm not a person of color. Why do I need to be in this battle? And what we don't see is that we are enabling this pattern to happen. We're enabling the treatment. When you see something on TV that is so hateful, it's happening because our culture and our society has allowed it to be okay. Like we've allowed it to continue to happen because we don't step up. Right now, so many people are rallied up about this. And that's great. Hopefully we can keep people to see that this is something that we are not going to back off on, because it is time to stop sitting on the sidelines. At the end of that, when Dr. King talked about lukewarm acceptance, it reminded me of Revelation. And in Revelation, it says, I know all the things you do, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were one or the other, but since you are lukewarm water, neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. And I think that's the frustration. Is like, I wish you would either be for racism or stand up in the fight. But acting like there's no fight is not helpful at all.
God has always called us to speak up and to speak out. And even in the Great Commission to make disciples, you've always been charged to speak up. So as anything with silence, that means that's an agreement, because you're not using the talents and the gifting that God has given you. God has put a lot of people in different areas with different influence, different platforms, and it's up to us to utilize everything God has given us to steward and to speak out against things. I understand a lot of people have the luxury of going every day and stuff like this not affecting you. I don't have that luxury. Every decision that I make, even to this day, is around my color of my skin, how I'm going to be viewed, how I need to move, how I need to act for different things. I mean, it was even earlier this year, I'm just walking and, somebody passed by and calls me the N-word just for no reason. I in a neighborhood that if I go running, I could be, killed or why are you here? So there's a lot of times I'll walk to my mailbox and then I'm like, oh, let me get my wallet, because some identification is better than no identification. I can be locked out of my house and I know I can get in from the side, but I'd rather call somebody or wait somebody, because if the wrong person sees me trying to get into my own house, that can end very badly for me. It's stuff like that. And people have to step up.
Yeah.
I had and speaking of these two conversations, I had one with a friend earlier today, and he said, a lot of people call themselves Christians. A lot of people say that they love Jesus, but can willingly just ignore it or ignore this. Hey, I love Jesus, but I don't like black people, or I love Jesus, but I don't care enough to support people and call out what's wrong, because that's going to mess up my personal life and my comfort. And even, and it's not easy. I have a good friend that's a police officer who's black. And so now he's in one of the most precarious place because he's on both lines. And so his whole mind is like, how do I navigate this? And we had a very, very authentic and real conversation where it came out to him being challenged, because I'm a veteran, and I understand the code of silence, but it doesn't matter, there's a percentage in every profession that there are bad people that do bad things and misabuse. Yeah. If there's a bad doctor, we call them out, they charge them, you sue them, you bar them. Yeah. And so the question was to him is, what are you doing? As a cop, what are you doing? Because for you not saying anything, that's a part of the problem too. Yeah. And very good question of, well, I don't have a big platform. That doesn't matter. You can talk to 1,000 people, and if one person starts to change and that conversation starts to start, that's all that matters, because that one person could turn around and change 1,000 other people.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it just seems like the issue's too big. It's too hard for us to overcome. And when we all work together, it makes a difference. But also when we realize that our efforts combined with the will of God makes a difference. Exactly. And so, listen, it is not okay to not speak up. In fact, it's sinful to see something that is happening that is wrong and to allow it to happen, because that's a sin of indifference. That's an indifferent attitude where you are saying, look, I'm not a racist, but I'm not going to speak up against that. You are not doing what God's called you to do. And by not doing what God's called you to do in that moment, you are sinning. And God sees all sin the same. So the sin you're committing is just as equal as the sin that the other person is committing in their racist act. You have to speak up to say, this isn't right. God called us to love all people, and you can't act like that. I was trying to think through how to understand this from my perspective, because I don't obviously have a lot of experiences where I have felt attacked by racism. Obviously, it doesn't affect me on a daily basis like it does you. And so I thought of something that I think some of us seem to think is similar, but I want you to kind of tell us why it's not. So my family, we enjoy traveling. We've been to a lot of countries, and we've experienced a lot of cultures. And sometimes countries are not very appreciative when they find out that I'm an American. In fact, they might look down on me a little bit or say something, and it seems like they're judging me for who I am. And I know some people think, well, that must be what it's like to be racist, or to have someone be racist against me. And so why is that different? What is different about that?
I think one of the biggest things is you got to take a look back and take a step back and seeing why they may be viewing you. So if you have a lot of conversations, like authentic conversations with people from around the world, everybody look at America as in a privilege. So a lot of times, from people that I've talked to, they're looking down at you because they look at you as coming from something of privilege, coming as something as Americans are wasteful. Americans don't know how to act. And it's more of a prejudice than anything else. The difference is they're not building a system to try to oppress you. They're not trying to go out of their way to cause harm. In life, like, okay, we got to come up with something that, he's American, well, we're not going to let him leave. He needs to learn what he did, or learn his place, or learn that he's not as good as he think he is. Yeah. And that's where I personally think a lot of that comes from, and that's what the difference is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I have experienced that, it's always easy for me to just walk away. And it's never more than just a casual word or thought, and it moves on. And also, I think one of the differences, as I was thinking about it too, is they don't identify me as American the moment they see me. But people can identify you as a person of color the moment they see you. Mm-hmm. There's no hiding that. There's no blending in. Mm-hmm. I can try and blend into a culture, but you don't have the luxury of just blending in. And like you said, every day of your life is not just on vacation. Every day of your life, it affects the decisions you make. The follow-up thought that I had to that was so many Americans enjoy traveling and going to other cultures. And we talk about it. We come home and we talk about how we went to this place and they had these things that they did, and it was so cool to see how they had this rich culture. And yet we come home and we have no interest in being a part of the culture of the people around us in our own country. We have no interest in saying, you have a little bit of a different background. You celebrate something differently than I do. Your family might have a little different past. You might listen to different music. And yet we're almost frustrated and angry that there is another culture that exists in our country. Like we think, well, it's my country. It should be my culture. It should look like I want it to look. And it's just this dichotomy of we want to go see it, but we don't want to see it at home. And that's just it's absurd.
I think it's more of a when we go on vacation, it's a highlight reel. We want the best of everything that we're there, but we don't want to take on anything that's the worst. We want everybody at their highlights. We want the culture and the best part, but then we don't want to experience or understand the stuff that they go through behind closed door or when we leave. And the thing is, I think it reminds people, because when you come back home, now you're reminded of everything. You're reminded of all the problems. You're reminded about all the sins and all the past. And so it's like, if I get closer to you and your culture, then I might have to accept the stuff, the bad part of it, or the things that may have happened from my ancestors, and have to come to terms with that. So if I could just stay away from it altogether, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, so many of the things that have happened in the past in this country, if I have to come to grips with all of that, then that weighs on how I've gotten to where I am. It changes the system of what's allowed me to thrive. And it means I have to come to grips with the fact that I might have been a beneficiary of things that you've been through in your past and your family's been through in the past. So I'm going to ask a question that probably is going to make some people uncomfortable if they weren't already. But why is it important to say Black Lives Matter?
The importance of Black Lives Matter is showing that you understand what is actually going on in the Black community. If we think about it, Black Lives Matter and everything came about, especially when everything blew up with Trayvon. And the direct response was all lives matter. The direct response was Blue Lives Matter. Me being in the military, I never heard Orange Lives Matter or Green Lives Matter, or, all in that sense. Yeah. And so it was a way to deflect. A lot of times when we don't want to acknowledge something, we deflect. And so there's plenty of examples. Like I said, my father passed away from cancer, and so it would be foolish of me if somebody's talking about breast cancer and then I stop and I'm like, whoa, all cancers are bad and everything else. But when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about something that's directly affecting right now. Mm-hmm. We have, diseases that kill people every day, as in cancer and HIV and stuff that affects everybody. But right now we've been focusing on COVID because that is a direct situation that is running unjustly.
Right.
That's running rampant, that needs special attention to control damage and control the outcome of people dying and people suffering. Mm-hmm. So saying Black Lives Matter is saying I acknowledge what is going on and what we need to do, because if you say,
nobody argued to say that we need to fight to defeat all viruses.
Right.
Let's talk about all viruses. Let's not focus on COVID.
Right.
Why are you leaving all the other viruses out?
Right. And so if you say all lives matter, why couldn't you say Black Lives Matter? It's the whole thing. We never said Black Lives Matter too or too much like that. It's Black Lives Matter, and there's even in the Bible, like I said, if you do something like that, Jesus was always talking about different specific people. But if we were to pull Jesus to the side and like, hey Jesus, hold up, we might be talking about a parable about the Jews and the Gentiles or the Levites, but what about everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that for some reason it seems like, and I have been, I've been one of those people in the past that struggled with that idea of why do we need to say Black Lives Matter? Like, why is that important? Why can't we say all lives matter? And a couple of things that I was thinking about was, first of all, for some reason, people get defensive and think, well, if I say Black Lives Matter, that means for some reason that other lives don't matter.
Right.
And I don't understand. Like, it's not that, like, love and concern for one group of people doesn't take away how much love and concern there can be for another group of people. It's
Right.
not like money. It's not like, well, you gave it to them and now I can't have it. The love is something that Jesus has provided for everyone. And it doesn't matter how many people we say their lives matter. It doesn't take away from how much your life matters. But one of the things that I realize also is that a lot of people want to hide behind the all lives matter, because for some reason there's something deep inside of them, some little seed of something that they still don't want to deal with. Mm-hmm. And if they have to say Black Lives Matter, it hurts. Like, it's like, if I could just say all lives matter, I can hide under the umbrella of everybody. Exactly. And I can kind of hold this group out to the side and not really mean it. It's like all lives matter, but I'm kind of got my hands, with my fingers crossed behind my back, because right. There's one group that I don't think matters as much as the others. Right. And so, I think that it is important that we should be able to say Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And that's not taking away from anybody, but like you said, what is the issue right now? If it's the issue is we're seeing Black people of color, having people hurt them, having people oppress them, having people do things that take away from them. So let's deal with that.
Right.
Let's deal with that. And if we get through that and we see another group that's struggling with that, then we can say Green Lives Matter whenever we get to Mars or whatever it is. But right now, it's Black lives that we have to take the battle on for. And it's not okay to simply say, you know what, I can't say that. You probably need to slow down and do some introspective look and say, why can't you say that? What's inside of you that won't let you admit that their lives matter?
I mean, even if we just break it down, of the words Black Lives Matter. That's all we're saying. Matter. That's it. Just matter.
We didn't say that they're the more important.
Right. And it's like, if there's a serious heart check that you need to have. If you can't even say that Black Lives Matter, like, if you can't say it, you don't. There's something in there that's stopping you. There's a bias. There's an unbelief. There's something that you're struggling with that that you need to come to grips with.
Yeah. So we want to talk a little bit about the church in this and what the church can do. But I guess the first question is, how has the church gotten this wrong? What has the church done over history that has not been helpful in this?
The church has missed the mark severely. One of the biggest things with civil rights and Black people, a lot of people like to look at it as politics. It's politics if these people have equal rights and treated justly in all aspects of life, and so we can kind of ignore it because it's under politics, and we shouldn't really talk about politics in church. Mm-hmm. And then we'll hide behind parts of the Bible. Yeah. If we just love people and we just pray, everything is going to go away. Yeah. But we forget, one of the most synonymous verses is faith without works is dead. And so a lot of times in the world and especially in this generation, we're pendulums. Yeah. We're one way or the other. And it doesn't work unless we bring both together. So yes, we're going to pray. Yes, we're going to love people, but we got to work too. We got to work within ourselves. We got to work for legislation to change the rules and laws and everything else, because that's where that work comes in from. Yeah. That work is us getting out and being that Great Commission and doing everything. It's almost like this. So the faith part of racism and everything dealing with the church that we try to hide behind is that heart check. And we know that that's God's job. We're supposed to present everything to God and pray and intercede and fast for that heart check. But on top of that, we have that work for when people's hearts don't change. They're not holding going, or if they don't change, that work part, that legislation, that making sure that people are held accountable is that check and balance. That we still protect people and we still do that work when we're still waiting for that heart.
Yeah. Well, you said a couple of things in there, and one of the things that I keep trying to figure out is, like, how is this a political issue? How is the value of a life a political issue? Like, I don't care what, like, how is it a conservative or a liberal ideal how much a life matters? And then I guess the other question that goes along with that is, if that's the case, if your politics are somehow informing that for you, what other lives do you fight for within your political ideals that you seem to not fight for? Because some people would say, well, it is important for the church to take on the issue of abortion or to take on the issue of child abuse. And these are all political issues, right? These are all, we need to change the laws. We need to get better laws in place to protect these groups of people. But why is it that the church can speak boldly about those, but the church can't say anything when it comes to racism?
If we go all the way back, the politics within that goes into the church. It's always been ingrained into the church. You had people, who owned slaves and still went to church on Sunday. You thought they were doing everything right, but in politics, that's fine. And so we get away with, our justifications and instead of going to the Bible with biblically what it says, what is wrong is what is wrong, what is right is what is right. But since a lot of us don't actually really read and we just regurgitate everything that we hear and we watch and we see, and we don't study to show our own self approved, then it's okay. But then at the same time, we don't want to rock the boat. If we just still come in love and praise God, then we're doing what's right. I can go to sleep at night.
I mean, I know when I look back at, I've been involved in church ministry now for about 12 years. And looking back at the time that I've spent in church, I haven't ever come face to face with the issue of racism in a church that I was in. But in all the things that we've come up against, in the obstacles we've come up against, one of the defining things that always seems to come into the question of how are we going to respond is, how is this going to affect the giving to the church, right? Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's led to the church being silent about this for so long, because they say, well, our people don't see it as an issue, so we don't need to make this an issue because we might lose attendees, we might lose giving, but we are not doing what God called us to do. And so the church is sitting silent, and God's saying, I put you here to be a voice in the wilderness, to be someone out there pointing people back to Jesus, and you are abandoning what I've called you to right now.
That's a great example. And you can go into a lot of churches, unfortunately, and look at the demographic or see the culture of the church, and they won't speak on what may offend majority of the church. Mm-hmm. And then we get to the point that we understand that the church is a business and everything else, but we're not our own supplier.
Yeah.
If we're doing exactly what God has called us to do, if we're in that vision of what God wants us for that church, He's gonna provide regardless. We're not gonna have to worry about it. If people leave, He'll bring more people. And you want the right people there. If they're not going to change and everything else, and you continue to pray, but you want God to bring in who's supposed to be in. But like I said, a lot of time is that's a real good tithing member. I don't know how we would make it if that family leaves
And God might have a bigger plan, and He's waiting, saying, if you just do what I said and quit worrying about how this is going to affect you because you're going to lose somebody of influence or financial ability, God's like, I've got something else I want to do. I've got something bigger, but you won't take that step with me. And I think so many churches right now, the national church, the global church is shrinking, and so many churches are losing membership. And I think part of it is because we aren't doing what God's called us to do.
Exactly.
We're focused on the wrong things, and so God's not able to. It's not that He's not able to. He's not moving in the churches because we aren't doing what He's asked us to do, and the culture sees right through it. The culture looks at the church and says, "You're not doing what you said you were supposed to do. Right. You're not standing up for people. You're too worried about your pocketbook, right. And you're not worried about standing up for the things that you say you believe in."
It's almost like, would you be in a community? Would you be in a marriage, in a family, willingly if you didn't feel supported?
Yeah.
Everything else is good, what you do and all you bring, but when it comes to you needing support and you needing protection, or me using what God has given me that's going to change something, I'm like, that's not my problem. Yeah. Why would I be there? And that's what the culture sees.
Yeah. Well, and so you kind of hit on something there we talked about a little bit, and that is this idea of the difference between a multi-ethnic church and a multicultural church. And some churches, it seems like they're content to have people of different ethnicities at their church, mm-hmm. but they don't have any interest of expressing the differences in their cultural backgrounds. Mm-hmm. It's, you're welcome to come to our church if you can follow our rules. Exactly. If you can look like we look, if you can sing the songs we want to sing, if you can talk the way we want to talk in these things and talk about the things we want to talk about, but don't bring your perspective with you.
And so that goes into that diversity of what God has brought. God created different cultures for different reasons. He created different people with different giftings. And the biggest thing, like it says, is multi-ethnic is, hey, we have all these different people in the crowd, coming in every Sunday, but let's not give them a position of power or a voice, because we don't rock that. You just keep doing what you need to do. You follow in, and then everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
It was even to the point. So, this is another personal thing. So when I was talking to some people, and they was asking me after God led me to Anchor, they was like, why are you at Anchor? It's a predominantly white church, and you have all these giftings and talents. Why are you here? Most churches, because of other church hurt, just want you for your talents or your gifts. And a lot of them won't allow you to be in a place of voice. And the root of that was, they always said, I just don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah.
In a place that you're supposed to be loved and to embrace the hurt. Yeah. I don't want you to be hurt out of going somewhere else that you're not fully welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think churches have been pretty guilty of saying, hey, you can come and be here. In fact, we'd love for you to serve. You want to give? We'd love that too. But we're not ready for you to lead a group. We're not ready to put you on staff. We don't want to put you in a position where you might actually start to change things, because otherwise we might lose our identity of who we are. And the reality, again, is God made all these cultures to be experienced together, and we would be a fuller experience if we were to embrace each other. And I know that's something that I've been thinking about for Anchor, is we've got to figure out, as we move ahead, how do we broaden our horizon, and how do we do things so that we can represent other cultures? Because I know that the style of how we do service, for the most part, it is a white service. Like it, we're open to the Spirit moving, and we're very lively. But the style of music and the way that we teach and the perspectives we generally bring are from the white culture. And so we've got to do a better job of that as a church and fix that issue, at least on our end. But that's for us as the church. I guess my question is, where do we solve the issue? Where does the issue of racism supposed to be solved? Is it a national issue? Is it a state issue? Who solves this?
Everybody has a personal responsibility, a personal charge to solve racism, and it has to be solved at every level. One of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation and kind of have, this is how it should look. These are conversations you should be having at home, with your family, with your kids. These are with people that you normally interact with, your friends, your co-workers. It's going to be uncomfortable. You have to get out of that. It's just like, you might have that one coworker that says stuff out of left field, but if you don't never challenge that, then now you're saying that you're accepting it, and that's fine. A lot of stuff, like we say we're Christians and we love each other, but people are watching us, and that's the only, some places and sometimes the only place people experience Jesus is how they experience us. And we let stuff fly, and they're like, oh, well, I don't want that anyway. But it starts everywhere. Like I said, this is just a starting step. There's continual movement. We have to look for ways to make impacts in our community. We have to make impact in laws and everything, and realizing what we can change and what influence and who the people we need to talk to, who the people that we need to get with. And it takes a group effort. It takes communities coming together. It takes churches coming together. As much as, like I said, the church is within us. So we have to get outside of these four walls, or how many walls we have, and be about change, speak about change, and move about change.
So, for me, as I'm trying to figure out what we do, we as Anchor wanted to start as a church trying to be intentional about that. But the only way it's going to work is, like you said, is for individuals. We can, at the church, we can come up with programs and systems and try and do all kinds of things, but it's all about what each person does in order for it to work. And so I just wanted to say, number one, you have to accept your responsibility in this. You cannot say that this is a problem for someone else to solve. This is someone else's issue, and they're going to have to solve it themselves. I can't get in the middle of solving the problem of racism for people of color. That's not true. If we were to look at salvation that way and say, you know what, they don't know Jesus, and that's their problem. They're going to have to solve that on their own. How would we spread the gospel? If it's not okay for us to say that they have to solve the problem of salvation on their own, then how is it okay for us to say that they have to solve the inequities of how they're being treated on their own? It's all about spreading the love of Jesus.
Exactly.
And so that is the role and the job and the call of the church, to come together and do that. But we need you as individuals to be a part of that. I heard somebody this weekend that said that it might not be your fault what we're in right now. It might not be your fault, but it is your fight. You did not necessarily do what got us here, but it's your responsibility to help fight to get us out of it. Because if we don't all start fighting together, it's going to be easy to ignore the voice of the minority. But if we all stand up, in fact, I heard a conversation last night where they were giving statistics that in recent polls, as much as 72% of Americans acknowledge right now that racism is a major issue for our country. That has never happened. There's never been a poll that has been that high. And so if that many people are starting to say there's a problem, that's good. Now what we need is for 72% of people to open their voice and say, we aren't going to stop until this is solved. And so right now, the question I want to ask you is your voice distracting from the issue, or is it helping to solve the issue? Because if you're arguing about how people are responding, maybe you don't like the way that certain people are talking right now. Maybe you don't like the way that they're responding in this situation. And we don't want to condone acts of violence, but we also don't want to take away from the voice of what's happening right now and say, you know what? We are going to support the cause and not use our voice to constantly fight about the methods of how each individual person is doing. Let's all just agree we need to continue to make sure that we are taking this fight on as a personal fight and not stop until it's over. We can't lose sight until the battle is won. The big thing that Roland and I have been talking about is, what do we do as a church? How do we have something intentional to take this on and to make a difference? And I read that book, Be the Bridge. I can't say it. Be the Bridge, and it is a very hard book to read. Not in the sense of the words. It's not written at a high level that I can't understand. But some of the stories that are in there And it just brings you to grips with really where we are as a country and really what our job as the church is in solving this racial inequity. And so one of the things that we've talked about is that we are going to start having Be the Bridge discussion group at Anchor. And the way those groups work is they are a small group of people that come together and meet, and they have structured conversations. There's 9 conversations that walk through all kinds of things. But the purpose of the group is to listen and to learn about the other people and the other person's background, what's brought them here, what they've experienced, because you can't dismiss their experience. And when you start to get to know other people and hear personally what they've been through, it helps us to see how we are being a part of that, what role we're playing in the system that exists right now. And so we're going to be starting those groups. Those groups are going to start in the month of July. And we don't have the exact details worked out, partly because we don't know who all's going to want to be a part of that. And we have to do a little bit of work behind the scenes to train ourselves and be ready. But we will start that in July. We want you to go online tonight if you are interested. Right after you watch this, you can go to anchorchapel.com/bridge, or there'll be a post up on Facebook that'll be up later this evening and throughout the day, throughout the week. You can click on. Right now, all you're saying is, I want to be on the list so that I know what's happening. Let us know. Let us know that you're interested in being a part of this conversation, because it is a conversation. But the biggest thing, especially for people in the majority, is to start the conversation and then to listen and see what we can learn. Because there is so much that I have learned just in the last week that it hurts to think, man, I'm 41 years old. I got to this point in my life, and I've missed this. Why was I thinking this wasn't my fight for so long? And so no more. We're going to make a difference, and we're going to do something with that. And Roland's going to be a part of that. Those groups it's not a group for just white people, right?
No, not at all.
In order for it to work, it has to be a
Right.
conversation between people of
Right.
color and people of all different ethnic
Exactly.
backgrounds.
Exactly.
And so I'm excited about that. Roland, is there anything that we can help someone with today to say, as you're having conversations, as you're trying to figure out how to approach this right now, how can they have a healthy conversation if they want to with somebody they know that is a person of color? Like, how do they start that conversation in a way that is going to come off right?
I think one of the best ways is being honest and transparent with yourself. I've had multiple calls and people just like, look, I really don't understand, or I want to understand what's really going on. I want to understand your background, what part that I'm playing in, what part that I'm not playing in. So can we meet? Can we talk? And can I just hear your story? Can I, tell me what hurts you, the things that you experience, so we can kind of move forward. So just be honest with just letting them know that, hey, I want to be very authentic and understand you better as a person that you experience. So let's talk.
Yeah. And I think one of the pieces of advice that you gave me early on, that I think this is kind of the root for a lot of people of why they don't start the conversation, is your conversation's not going to be perfect. You're going to say things that are going to be wrong, and that's how you learn.
Exactly.
Like, you say something, and then a person says, okay, well, let's talk about what you just said and what that meant. And so what do we have to do? We have to start the conversation.
Right.
If we just sit back and say, I might say it wrong, we'll never get anywhere.
Exactly. You just have to talk. You just have to start. Like I said, no conversation is going to be perfect, and there's no guarantee that it ever will be, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
It's all about progression.
Well, Roland, man, I love you. I appreciate you, and I am looking forward to what God's going to do, and believing in good things for the future. And so I'm going to pray, and then we'll wrap up for tonight, and we'll see what comments and questions you have. If we need to, we'll have another conversation later on. We'll come back. We're not done.
And I just want to say one thing.
Oh,
before
yeah.
you pray us out.
Yeah.
I want to encourage everybody that's listening. If you're struggling, if you're tussling with something right now, with this conversation or anything, I want you to be very transparent with God. A lot of times we hide things from God, and God can't touch that because we're not being transparent and real with ourselves. So I challenge you to have a real conversation with God and ask him to expose the things in your heart and in your feelings and the things that you're struggling with, and to bring people and material and stuff that you need to get in that vision that he has for you.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm gonna pray, and we're just gonna go from here. All Keep right. the conversations going. Heavenly Father God, I come to you now, Lord. Just sad for where we are as a country. Sad for what we've allowed to exist. Just sad for what the church has sat quietly through for so many years. But God, I'm hopeful as I see so many people with their hearts awakening, with their eyes opened. And so, Lord, we come to you and we ask that you would continue to just stir us up, that you would not let us sleep easy until we continue, until we win this battle over the evil hatred of racism, God. And so I pray for each person that's listening. I pray that they would go and have great conversations after this. I pray that you would just encourage us in the battle. We know it's not going to be easy. There's going to be people that stand against us, but that's okay because we have you standing for us. So God, just go with us now. Use us for your glory. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Right. Well, Roland, have a great week, man. And if you are still watching, go sign up online for the Be the Bridge groups. And I'm going to put the link right now in the comments so you can do that. And we'll see you soon.
See y'all soon.